Spring is right around the corner, and one of my favorite things to do is to start some seeds. In this video, I'm going to show you what I do, and maybe you'll learn a few things so you can do the same. My name is Michelle Avis. I'm an engineer, a permaculture educator, and an avid gardener. And we're starting this series because there's just so many interesting things going on our farm, and we'd love to share with you the little projects, ideas, and learnings that are going on here. If you haven't already done so, make sure you subscribe. Coming up, we're teaching a permaculture design course as well as an advanced permaculture planning and design. And stick around to the end and I'll tell you more. Now on with the video. Well, why start seedlings? The truth is, you actually don't have to start seedlings. If you're new to gardening, I actually recommend that you probably just start by doing direct seeding straight into the garden. But if you've been gardening for a couple years and you want to get more productivity out of our short growing season, starting seeds before you can actually put them out or direct seed is a great way to get more productivity out of our short season. So let me take you step by step how I do this. The first step is planning. You've probably or maybe have seen someone with tomatoes that are root bound because whoever started them started way too early, and by the time it's warm enough for them to put it into the garden, that poor little plant has been in this tiny little pot and not gotten enough light for way too long. And then effectively they've stunted the growth. When I'm planning, I'm keenly aware of when the last possible or the last average frost date for my property is. And based on that last frost date, I'm thinking about the plant or the plant family that I'm trying to set out seedlings for. And I have to know if it's frost tolerant or if it's not frost tolerant. And based on that, we'll set the date I can set it out. And then I'm also thinking about how much indoor space I have to grow seedlings. And I want to make sure that I don't exceed the indoor space I have. Based on those two things, I'm thinking about when I want to start them, and I'm calculating backwards. And lastly, I'm using a spreadsheet to greatly simplify all of these calculations for all of these different plants. We'll make this spreadsheet available so you can have a look and build one for yourself. Two very quick examples. I grow a lot of squash plants and pumpkin. I really like 4-week-old seedling. I know that they're very frost sensitive, so I cannot put them out into the garden until June 1st. I like the size of about a 4-week-old squash, so I'll start those ones on May 1st. With brassicas, a different plant family, they're far more cold tolerant. I know that I could get those into my garden in maybe the first week of May. Again, I like a 4-week size seedling. So that means I can start those in early April. Tomatoes, I know for my space that an 8-week-old seedling works really well. Tomatoes are also very cold sensitive, so June 1st is a good date to set them out into the garden. And if I take off 8 weeks from that, that means I would start my tomatoes around April 1st. Okay, now how do I actually start seedlings? Well, there's really 3 ways that I like to use. I like to do soil blocks. Here's an example. You'll see, no pot. I also do use pots, and here's some examples of 3 different types of pots. And the last method I like to use is I'd call like bulk seeding in the clamshell. All right, what is a soil block? This is a mixture of 1/3 peat, 1/3 sand, and then 1/3 mix of soil and compost. What's nice about them is that they have no pot. So I can make a whole bunch of blocks ahead of time, and when I'm ready to plant, it's just really quick. The other advantage is they have very, very little, really virtually no transplant shock, because of course all the roots self-prune. If you've ever taken a plant out of a pot that you've bought from a store, a nursery, you'll often notice the roots really wound up tight, and that's really hard on the plants. It often stunts their growth. So you don't have that at all with soil blocks. Let's go make some soil blocks. All right, here's the list of materials you'll need to make your soil blocks. You'll need a soil block maker. This one here makes 12 at a time. I love it. Here's another soil block maker. It's a larger one, it's a 4-inch, and only makes 1 at a time. You'll need some sort of a bin. I like to use quite a large bin. Make sure it doesn't have any cracks or holes in it. You don't need a tarp, but you'll see why I really like to have one. You'll need some water, and then you'll need the ingredients for your soil blocks, which I've previously mentioned are peat, 1/3, some sand, and you'll need, that's just a mix of soil and compost. This is already pre-mixed, so I'm just gonna add a small little bucket of peat, a small little bucket of compost and soil, and a small bucket of sand, just so you can see the ratio. And here's where I really like the tarp. It makes the mixing really easy. All I do is I grab an edge, give it a shake, come over here, grab the edge, give it another shake, and I'll do that 3 or 4 times until it's really well mixed. I also try and break up any clumps. They're especially difficult with the smaller soil blocks. Next, we move this mix into the large bin. Next, we're gonna add water to this mix. I'm gonna stir it up with a shovel and then keep adding water and stirring up with a shovel. And I'll know it has enough water when I take a handful of soil, give it a good hard squeeze, and about 2 to 3 drops of water comes out. You can kind of just get a sense, you know, it's wet. You can kind of tell it's gonna hold, right? You can see it's holding its shape. That's a good indication. So now that we've got the mix, you'll need a tray. I really like flat bottom trays. So push the soil block maker into the soil. I like to twist it a little bit. I just find the soil goes in better. And then when you lift it up, sometimes you need to pat it in. If the soil's falling out, that's an indication that it's too wet. So this looks about perfect. I'll position the blocks on the tray. I like to push down on the handle just to compress the blocks a little bit. And then I pull up on the handle to release the mud blocks from the soil block maker. I don't like to move the blocks until after they've dried a little bit, but once they've dried, I can kind of shift them into these spaces and make sure I fill up a whole tray. Okay, this is really heavy, but here you have a tray full of soil blocks. The 2-inch blocks are really great for your smaller seedlings, but if you're making a larger seedling like a tomato or a squash plant or a pepper plant, you'll want to use the larger soil block. And then the beauty with this size, if your plant outgrows your 2-inch block and you need to put it into a bigger pot, all you do is you simply drop your 2-inch into your 4-inch, no pots required. I really love using soil blocks. And when I'm organized and I make a bunch of soil blocks early in the season, you can see it saves me tons of time as I get into planting. However, I'm not always organized, and sometimes I just need to start a seedling and I don't have time to make blocks. In that case, I'll just use a pot. And this is really a conventional way of starting a plant. I have a pot, I have potting mix, which I just bought from my local nursery. I do like to add some compost to my potting mix. Wet your potting mix so that it's not dry like this. But once it's wet, fill your pot, of course, and go ahead and start your seedling like that. The third way I like to start seedlings is, we'll call it the bulk seeding method. I really like to use these old lettuce or spinach clamshell containers. I save them and have all my neighbors save them for me. I poke some holes in the bottom so that there's drainage. And I always try and fill them up and wet them the day before I'm gonna plant seed. Something you'll notice with the potting mix that you buy from the store is that it's hydrophobic, meaning that it's so dry, it'll actually repel water. You really need to soak the water in before you plant seeds into it. On day 1, I'll fill it like this. I'll add some water and tamp it down with a piece of wood like this. And if I'm planting lettuce, I'll sprinkle the seeds lightly, just like this. I like to put a lid on it so it doesn't dry out too fast. Same thing goes, clamshells work great. I use this for plants that I'm not intending on growing very large. I'm intending on growing them to just, I'd say, 2 to 3 inches. And then my intention is it's called pricking out. Usually I use a pencil or a stick, and I pull them out and I put them straight into soil. Tomorrow I'll be planting these with some seeds and labeling them. So really important that you label them well. I've made that mistake many times and not known what I was growing. Once they're planted, you're gonna wanna put them somewhere warm. I really like to use a heat mat like this one. It's not a necessity. It will vastly increase your germination and improve your chance of success.
because heat mats basically cut down the number of days the seeds need to germinate, and they cut it down substantially, like by 2/3. Either get a heat mat or find a warm spot in your house while they're germinating. And while they're germinating, you have to check on them every day, make sure they're staying moist. It's a good idea to put a cover over them to keep the moisture in, especially if you have heat mats underneath. And then when they start to germinate, you need to move them to somewhere where there's light. If you do not have a south-facing window or a nice windowsill, you're gonna want to get some grow lights. So go find your nearest grow light supplier and go talk to them, tell them about your space, and they'll help you design a system that works for the amount of space and the light that you need based on what you're growing.
Well, that was everything. If you want more videos like this about projects on our farm, let us know in the comments below. At Verge, we offer incredible tools and resources to help you out wherever you are in your permaculture journey. So whether you're just trying to take your first steps, looking for some guiding processes, or taking specialized education, we've got you covered. Head to vergepermaculture.ca to learn more.